She said her exes moved away, but I found their bones in our garden. I called the police. Now she's facing 2 murder charges. I met Grace at a quiet little bookshop in Norwich. She was leaning over an old gardening journal, completely absorbed, with that kind of soft focus you don't see much anymore. I remember asking if she was looking for tips, and she gave me a polite smile, then nodded without saying much. That was Grace, always present, but never over-explaining. We struck up a few casual chats over the next weeks, mostly about books or the weather. She was quiet, thoughtful, and always had a calm way about her, like nothing could ever disturb her peace. 6 months later, we were married. It all moved quickly, but with her, nothing felt rushed. Everything felt intentional. She wasn't the type to talk much about her past, and I didn't pry. I figured maybe she'd had heartbreaks like everyone else. We were both in our mid-30s. It wasn't unusual to carry some history by that point. What mattered was that she made the present feel warm, safe. Every time I looked at her, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. After the wedding, we moved into her family home, a small but charming cottage nestled deep in the Norfolk countryside. It sat at the edge of an old forest, with ivy climbing the brickwork and wild roses crawling along the fence. Grace called it a house with history, but never elaborated. When I asked once what she meant, she just said, "It's been here longer than I have." That's enough. It suited her, quiet, timeless, a little isolated. We didn't have neighbors nearby, just rolling fields and the occasional deer in the morning mist. I was working remotely at the time, so settling into that kind of life was easy. We'd spend evenings cooking together, then sit on the porch and drink tea while the wind moved through the trees. There was a quiet rhythm to it all, and I loved it. She had a deep love for gardening. Our backyard was sectioned into neat little patches of vegetables, herbs, and flowers. She especially loved the roses. Said they were her therapy. I tried helping a few times, but she preferred doing most of it alone. Some things are better tended to in silence, she told me once, gently brushing soil off her gloves. I respected that. Everyone needs their space. Besides, she looked peaceful when she was out there, her hat pulled low, her hands in the earth. She could spend hours without noticing the time. Still, after a few months, I started noticing small things that didn't sit right. She was particular, obsessively so, about one corner of the garden, the one near the back shed. No one was allowed near it. She said the soil there was delicate and needed a certain touch. The shed itself was always locked. When I asked what was inside, she said it was just old tools and memories, but the way she said it made me drop the subject. I wanted to believe she was just private, that some people carry things they aren't ready to share. But the silence around her past became louder over time. I'd ask about her ex-husbands. She'd mentioned having been married before, and she'd wave it off like it was nothing. They moved away. It didn't work. That's all, she said once, brushing her hands clean and walking off before I could ask more. I let it go, for a while, but as the days passed, there were little moments. Late at night, I'd wake up and notice she wasn't in bed. I'd hear faint sounds from outside, like movement near the garden, though in the morning she'd insist she hadn't gone anywhere. "You were dreaming," she'd say with a calm voice that made me question myself. It wasn't that I didn't trust her. I just started to feel like I didn't know her at all. And in that house, surrounded by quiet fields and no one for miles, not knowing felt dangerous. It was a Tuesday when I finally decided to ask about the shed again. Grace had just come in from a long day in the garden, her hands muddy and her boots caked in dirt. I made tea and, as casually as I could, said, "What's in that old shed, really?" Her whole body paused, not dramatically, not like a movie, just a split second too long before she answered. "Old tools," she said flatly, not meeting my eyes. "Nothing worth poking around in." I nodded, but I caught the edge in her tone. She wasn't just avoiding the topic, she was warning me. After that, the air between us shifted. She wasn't angry, exactly, but colder, more distant. She spent more time in the garden, sometimes after dark, her lantern glowing softly near the rose bushes. I told myself I was imagining things, that maybe she was just going through something. I offered to help more around the house. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Then came the night I heard it, the sound of digging. Not loud. I sat up in bed and listened. The back door clicked shut a minute later. I got up and peeked through the window. Her lantern was out there, swaying gently in the dark, near the rose beds. She was kneeling, her hands moving methodically. I didn't say anything. I just watched until she finished, wiped her hands on her apron, and came back inside without a word. She slipped into bed like nothing had happened. The next morning, I asked what she'd been doing outside. She blinked. "You must have been dreaming," she said again. That line was starting to wear thin. A week later, our water pressure dropped, and Grace asked if I could check the line. The main connection ran near the back of the garden, close to her rose bushes. The ones she always insisted were hers alone. She was at the market that morning, so I figured I'd take the chance and dig without her hovering. I only meant to dig a small trench, just enough to expose the pipe. But a few inches down, my shovel hit something strange, not metal, not rock. It was softer, almost like leather, but thicker. I dropped to my knees and brushed the soil away with my hands. What I found didn't register at first. A piece of cloth, then what looked like a rib cage. I froze. My brain tried to tell me it was some animal, a large dog, maybe, but something inside me already knew that wasn't true. The shape, the size, the way the bones curved. It was human. I backed away, my breath short. My first thought was to call her, to ask, to beg for an explanation. But instead, I called the police. They arrived within the hour. Grace got back just as the officers started cordoning off the garden. She saw the tape, saw the hole, and didn't say a word. She just stood there, her market bag hanging at her side, staring. They asked her questions. She didn't answer. She looked calm. As they dug further, the truth came out. There weren't just bones. There were 2 full sets of remains, buried carefully beneath the rose bushes. Both were male. Both had been dead for years. Within 2 days, they were identified as her previous husbands. Men who had been reported missing. Men she had told me moved away. Men who had never left this property. And all this time, she'd been planting flowers over them. The house felt foreign after that day, like a place I had wandered into by mistake. I wasn't allowed to stay the night there once the remains were confirmed. The police sealed off the garden, the shed, even the kitchen. I gave a statement at the station and stayed with a friend in town while the investigation unfolded. They brought her in that evening. Grace didn't resist. No struggle, just quiet compliance. She sat in the back of the police car with the same calm face I had seen 100 times over tea, or while she tended to the roses. That was the most disturbing part. She wasn't afraid. She looked almost relieved. I wasn't allowed to speak to her, but I was there when they let her out the next morning, handcuffed and still wearing her muddy gardening coat. I couldn't help myself. I stepped closer and said the only thing I could think of. Why? She stopped walking, turned her head slowly, and looked me right in the eyes. Her voice was low and steady. They stopped loving me the way you do. That was all. No tears. No apologies. Not even anger. She turned back toward the police car and got in without another word. Over the next few weeks, everything came out. Both men had been reported missing, years apart. One had supposedly gone abroad for work. The other, she claimed, had left her after a fight. There were no traces, no bodies, no clear evidence, until now. One had been strangled. The other, poisoned. The investigators said she'd planned it all. Not impulsively, patiently, like tending a garden. She didn't just kill them, she erased them. I found out later the shed was full of personal belongings she never threw away. Watches, shoes, letters. Things she couldn't let go of, but didn't want anyone else to find. The strangest part? Everyone in the village remembered her as lovely. Quiet, polite, kept to herself. No one suspected a thing. One old man even told the police she seemed too gentle to hurt a fly. Grace is currently awaiting trial. The press got hold of the story within days. The widow of Norfolk, they called her. Some true crime podcast reached out to me for an interview. I declined. Some nights I think about what might have happened if I hadn't found those bones. If the water line hadn't broken. If I'd never asked about the shed. How long would she have let me love her? Would I have ended up under those roses too, once the warmth faded? I still think about her sometimes. I don't know if she ever truly loved me, or if I was just next in line. But when I close my eyes, I hear her voice in my head, calm and cold. They stopped loving me the way you do. I loved her, and that's what haunts me most.